Hello, my monstrosities. Hello once again. Today I bring to you a DBD discussion video, and as you can see from the title, we're talking about skill, and I can already hear people going, "Oh, but Trickster doesn't take skill with him being on the screen." Well, I want to talk about this topic in which we're going to have to get some things straight. When people talk about skill in DBD, they always think of what they refer to as mechanical skill. Skill, defined by Merriam-Webster, is the ability to use one's knowledge effectively and readily in execution or performance. That's what skill actually is. So regardless of how you feel about the knight, knowing that you can drop a Carnifex and walk through the pallet and get the M1 pretty quickly is still skill. You might not like it, but that's still skill. Same with Trickster. Yeah, you might not like that you running back and forth in some weird headless chicken motion is going to get you down, but it does take skill to know, oh, I should have a nice lane to pull out my knives to put the person down because this is the end of the jungle gym or something like that. So, for this, we're going to talk about mechanical skill to appease all the people before they start typing without fully watching the video. Then next, the other thing about skill that I want to talk about is how easy it is to win on the maps regardless of who you are. There's some characters in which you can win on pretty much any map once you have enough skill with the character. Regardless of how you feel about Nurse, she does still take a lot of skill to actually play. A lot of people with several thousand of hours would go, oh, Nurse isn't that hard. And, well, then you wonder why they aren't automatically 4King throughout the entire day because, well, she's just that good, right? Nurse does still take a bit, but she does win on pretty much every map. So instead, the people that are going to have tougher times at certain maps requiring more skill to use them on those maps are who I'm going to be deeming the ones that require more skill. And then finally, this one isn't really up to the characters themselves. This is something that is pretty much community defined and kind of game mechanics. It's going to be techs, and if it requires you a tech to pull off the character, it's going to take more skill. You might have something like the Legion tech, in which if you are getting blinded while vaulting over a pallet in Frenzy, it'll take you out of Frenzy and you just get the hit. Then go ahead. But does it take a lot of skill to pull that off? It does, because you need to know it. But is it mechanical? That's up for debate. So, with those parameters set, let's talk about some people that actually require skill. And who requires the most skill? I think I'll be saving that person for last, in my own humble opinion. So, let's take it from the top, shall we? We've already talked about Nurse. I'm not going to give her too many points because she wins on every map. There's not too many techs that I know of with Nurse. If you know some Nurse tech, please let me know down below. But with those two out of the way, you're just left with mechanical skill. And yes, Nurse is still very skillful. She isn't the most skillful. And of course, we have Billy, who a lot of people are happy is going to get an actual buff in the mid chapter. Now, don't get me wrong, it does take a lot of mechanical skill to pull off Billy at his highest peaks, but at the skill floor, that's the very bottom when you can start using the character, Billy doesn't take that much. Like I've said many times in my videos, I am not a good Billy player, and if I can just walk up to people and use a chainsaw, well then, how much skill does it need? Yes, if you want to be flashy with Billy, you're going to be having to do a little bit of work, but yeah, so far so good, right? So a little bit neutral on how much mechanical skill. And then we come to the criteria of maps. Billy can feel absolutely abysmal on certain maps. If you are stuck on an indoor map or something that just has terrible loops and a bunch of junk in the way, Billy's going to feel bad, but at the end of the day, you are still a 115 who can catch up to people and try to make use of the chainsaw. And by it not as flashy as you might want it to be, you can still probably use your power one way or another. And finally, there are some techs with Billy, such as curving that requires the engravings, and a few other things that I've seen people pull off. But again, if you can still be successful with the character with almost nothing, I think that we're going to have to knock Billy down a little bit from being the most mechanically skilled. Don't get me wrong, still pretty high, but not the most. Then we come to somebody like Huntress, who everybody, oh my gosh, you have to practice so much to use Huntress. And then I've shown time and time again, you can kind of just spam out hatchets and probably win. There are certain maps in which it's going to hurt a lot. Okay, it's going to hurt a lot. Have you tried playing Huntress on Haddonfield? I don't recommend that as a good time. Oh, but the middle's open. You should be able to just hit people. Well, surprise, surprise, there's also a lot of buildings on that map that people go in and all around loop-de-loop and pull. And, well, Huntress is a 110, doesn't have a very good time. So, when you come to maps like those, or giant maps in which, yes, as a 110, it takes maybe, 5 more seconds to cross the map, I think somebody calculated, than a 115, that doesn't mean that it still isn't bad. But, on the other hand, for Huntress, she can cross map. So, if you have a big open map, then go ahead, throw a hatchet, and maybe hit somebody, especially if you have aura reading. So, does she take all the most skill? To perform? No. To be the best? Yes. So, we'll table Huntress for a little bit. Then we come to another person with the chainsaw, Bubba. You're going to hate me for saying this, but Bubba does take a little bit of a skill, especially if you aren't using the staple of Bamboozle, which I don't recommend, because Bubba is at the mercy of the maps. Yes, Bubba, oh, there's certain maps in which there's a lot of things that are invisible, such as Eerie, in which all of a sudden you're bumping into bushes, or Garden of Joy, same thing. There are a lot of things in the game in which Bubba will bump, and if you aren't aware of that, it's going to be quite painful. And, well, yes, we all know you can resort to playing dirty and just trying to camp somebody out, because who's getting past a camping Bubba? Probably nobody. So, goes down a little bit. And then when it comes to techs, there are some techs, such as knowing that if you spin while you are in the little temper tantrum, if there's somebody hides from you in a locker, it'll make it harder for them to time it right. That is another plus side for giving Bubba the most skillful award, but at the end of the day, we have to admit that if there is something that you can resort to just kind of just turn the game on its head and do it very effectively, it doesn't take the most skill to actually effectively win across all the maps. Then we go down a little bit. Legion, who is still on the screen. Well, there is a tech, but at the same time, not very much mechanical skill. Whereas we have somebody like Plague, who does pretty much what Legion does, but arguably better. Yes, by spreading your plague along to several other survivors, you can inflict injuries all galore, but at the same time, you are at the mercy of RNG on top of maps. If you have a big map and your only corrupt pool is across from you and everybody doesn't feel like cleaning, well then you are an M1. And on the other hand, if everybody's cleaning very far away from you and people aren't staying infected, you are an M1. A lot of the time, Plague does have mechanical skill involved, but a lot of time, a lot of her RNG might be the death of her. Especially when you have the projectiles that her vom is, in which sometimes it'll just pass through people and do nothing. I have seen some cracked out Plague players that make very good use of the character. I can't say I know any techs for her off the top of my head, but Plague is a pretty good contender, but unfortunately, RNG works both ways. There are going to be some times in which it is really hard to win with Plague on certain maps, but at the same time, it can sometimes be very easy. And at the end of the day, Plague does change the game for survivors. She makes it so that people go broken, so that those medkits that they had stacked up in Circle of Healing are utterly useless. So does it take a lot of skill? Debatable, but not the most skill. Then we have somebody like Oni, who a lot of mechanical skill and is at the mercy of maps like Billy and Bubba. If you don't know how to do certain things and how to handle certain tiles on certain maps like Leary's, you are going to be in for a rude awakening, especially because your power is on a timer. So that's Oni, who gets a little bit bonus points for requiring skill. Then we have somebody like Slinger. Point and click, almost. With the nerf, that means that there's more of an ADS time, so you can't just quick scope. Of course, Slinger has needed more mechanical skill to pull off, but at the same time, there's more skill required for knowledge, as in knowing certain holes are where you can shoot and pull in, and so on and so forth. The better you are with Slinger, the better you are in the game. And he does have a tough time when it comes to certain maps. If a map is too big, or if a map has too high of the tiles, Slinger effectively gets worse unless you know how to deal with him offhand. So, Slinger does get bonus points for knowing how to use him overall in this determination of skill. Then we have somebody like Pyramid Head. Also has a projectile, but it goes through walls and is a 115. So at the end of the day, he also changed the game with the way that hooks are effective. Does he require the most skill? No, but he does require a decent amount of it. So we're going to take him down a notch too. Then you have somebody like Blight, who is very good, especially when it comes to the add-ons, but is very mechanically skillful. But at the same time, is not at the mercy of many maps. Most maps you can overcome, but, don't get me wrong, because I know I heard Blight meanings like frowning their face. There is skill in knowing how to use Blight on the maps, because a lot of them can tell you if you play Blight on Swamp, you are going to have a bad time if you don't know exactly which trees have collision or which rocks don't magically. Same with Ormond. Blight has this weird, unique circumstance in which the game doesn't want to work sometimes. So, Blight does get bonus points for the maps, even though he is good on a lot of them. Then we go to somebody like Twins. Yes, there is essentially a projectile, but at the same time, you don't really feel like you're at the mercy of the map when you're playing Twins. You can be in two places almost at the same time. Yes, you don't ever really want to be completely across from one another, but you can apply pressure. And with the upcoming update, hopefully healing is reduced a little bit, but that's a matter of healing in the current state. Yes, it does take mechanical skill to know when you should pull out Victor or when not to, and then a bit of map knowledge, but at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do with Twins. So I have to take them down a peg in this battle of who has the most skill. Then we go to Trickster. You've heard me talk about how abysmal certain maps can be to play as Trickster. And people would say that it takes no skill to play Trickster because you just throw knives, and if they hit, they eventually go down. Surprise, surprise, you are faster than the survivors, so that's probably going to happen on any of the bad guys. And you'll also find what I've talked about several times, that the people that say this usually just have no clue what they're doing. They're either running in a circle like a headless chicken in front, hoping to make you waste your knives, or they're running in a straight line in a dead zone and then claiming that that is the issue. So, yes, I do have bias towards Trickster, but I'm not going to fake like he is the most skillful in the game. There are a lot of maps in which he is terribly weak, but much like Bubba, you can resort to some pretty nasty tactics, such as just camping somebody out and possibly tunneling, because if you are stacked up on knives, endurance doesn't really mean much to you. It can be pretty bad, as a well-timed DH can get in the way while you're trying to get somebody down, but if you're just trying to get somebody out of the game, Trickster is your man. Then you have somebody like Nemesis, who also has a skill shot similar to Pyramid Head, as that's what people keep telling me. Yes, it does take a bit to know that mechanically, Nemesis is a bit better than most. If you drag the tentacle, you have a lingering hitbox, so on and so forth, and a little bit of tag sub. If you do the tentacle right as somebody's dropping the pallet at an angle, you just kind of walk through it, yada yada yada. But at the same time, Nemesis no longer feels like he's at the mercy of maps. Yes, your zombies will get in the way, but Nemesis's biggest weakness is people being healed up and getting rid of the blue on them pretty frequently. At no point in time does the person that destroys the environment feel like they are at the mercy of the environment. I know that the zombies can be stuck, but that's more of a passive effect more than your main power. So if you're relying on zombies, yes, I guess you can argue that it takes more skill to use Nemesis, but at the same time, they are wandering RNG AI in which you probably weren't plotting your course for anyway. So, Nemesis goes down a little bit in that regards. Kind of the same with Cenobite. Yes, he has a power that takes mechanical skill, but as I've talked about several times, I am somebody that uses efficiency. I am not going to shoot out chains non-stop 24/7 just because I can. A lot of the time, you'll do better catching up to people just walking at them. Surprise, surprise. And over time, people will have to address the box unless a chain hunt starts. The other thing with Cenobites is that you don't really have bad maps. Yes, indoor maps, your chains might break on things easier, but at the same time, that's not what negates your power. You might have something like self-aware that completely nullifies it, but if you throw on one of the purple add-ons that spawns additional chains if they're broken by the environment, you'll be perfectly fine. Cenobite is a pretty solid bad guy at the end of the day, so there's not much to worry about. Kind of the same with Artist, who just gets to ignore the environment much like Nurse. The only weakness is elevation, in which are you at the mercy of maps? To an extent, but at the same time you are still a 115 who can hit people from across the map through maps. So, Artist, I'm sorry, you're not the most mechanically skillful. And then we have Wesker. We have Wesker, who does require mechanical skill despite what you may want to think. Yes, he's good, but you have to be good with him. And also, same blight issue as which you have to know the maps, in which sometimes you will slide, sometimes you will bump on random hitboxes like Bubba, sometimes you just will slide a little bit further. Wesker has all the issues of Blight and Bubba with skill attached on top of it. You are kind of at the mercy when you are playing Wesker if you don't know what you're doing. And now that we've gone through those as a general feel of who requires mechanical skill and the maps, let's talk about techs, and let's go back for the top of it. Yes, there are from Billy techs that people are telling me are existing, and usually it results in a curve. But at the same time, is a curve a tech, or is that just using a high amount of skill? I don't know, you tell me in the comments below how you feel about that argument. But at the same time, I can't say that Billy is the most skillful because there aren't techs that you need to utilize to make him work on every map. Like I said, you are still a 115 that you can walk at people and use your chainsaw. Don't get me wrong, I'm sorry, I do like Billy, but I cannot give him the most mechanically skillful like I think a lot of people try to give him. Then we come to Huntress, who doesn't have any techs, and yes, I skipped Nurse, she's already out. Huntress, there's no text. You just throw them and pray, and if you have aura reading, you throw it up. So, not going to give Huntress the most mechanical skillful either. And much like Bubbo to Billy, you walk at people, you have a chainsaw, and you probably have bamboozle. So, if things get tough, camp it out. You're probably not the most mechanically skillful when it comes to this. Going back down to Plague, who is still on the screen, because we already eliminated the rest of the row. There are some techs that I've seen, such as infecting the hook instead of the person that you put on the hook. That way the person that gets the unhook will be infected instead of waiting for the person on the hook to become broken, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of neat things you can do with Plague, but at the same time, you are still at the mercy of RNG. So, again, things can go really bad for you, and things can go really well. And that's Plague in a nutshell. Then we come down to Oni, who does have techs. Indeed, there are techs with Oni in which you have to pretty much hospital flick to get over those 90 degrees at things like looking down and looking up to control how everything works. Oni takes a lot of techs to make work on certain environments, especially if you know how, which kind of eliminates Slinger and Executioner in the tech department, because there's no real techs. You kind of just aim, and if you know what you're doing, you hit. Then we come down to Blight, who has the dreaded hug tech. Oh my gosh, it's the hug tech. Everybody knows how to do the hug tech. Everybody's just hug teching 24/7. My favorite part of DBD is when the Blight said it's hug tech time and hug teched all over everybody, right? The dreaded hug tech, I know people want to talk about it, but listen, it's not the easiest thing to do. People that have thousands of hours in the game can tell you that. Yes, Blight is a very good character, but the hug tech is still very much a skill issue. If you don't know how to do it, you are going to still have certain issues on certain maps, no matter what you're doing. And yes, Blight does have busted add-ons that carries him, so as far as at the base character, needs more skill, but let's be real, Blight has insane add-on, so I can't really give him the most skillful. And I'll be honest, as a Trickster player, what's this, going on 2 years, I know I'm going to hear from fellow Trickster mains, probably somehow, some way on a Reddit thread or something. Trickster does have tech. I'm going to be honest, no, not really. Yes, there are things like you can use the bouncy knives, and at certain points, and sada sada ya, and da 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 da, woo up the bam. Let's be real with ourselves. There's no trickster tech. I could call something the trickster tech as in throw a knife and B hop or something like that. No, it's trickster is straightforward in the approach of you want to be mechanically skilled enough to hit your shots several times to get somebody down. But let's be real. Now, Nemesis arguably has a tech, yet it's more of a mechanic. If you played Nemesis, you know that you can drag the tentacle because of the lingering hitbox. And that's about it. Is that enough to warrant more skill in this discussion? Probably not. Let's be honest. And pretty much that eliminates this row as well. If we're being real, there's no text for a lot of the ranged ones. If any of the ranged ones, I don't think I've said so far, that have a ranged option, I should say, because he's not primarily ranged, right? Nobody necessarily needs to rely on a tech to pull off. But you know who does have a tech that I see not too many people have mastered, that also I believe has RNG? The jury's still out on that. Wesker, the rebound tech? I don't know how to do it, so I have no footage of it, but if you look it up, it's pretty insane. You can bounce off of things and kind of 360. It's like a hug tech, but not. And then you can go back into the action with your second bound. It's cold. It's clean. And yes, that means that Wesker is going to go up on the list a little bit because of this tech. So what we really have left are Wesker, Blight, and Oni. If we're being real at the text that I've talked about so far. Now, out of these three, who do you think I'm going to give it to? I'll give you a second right now to type down below, and then, well, just put my guess is yada yada, and we'll see at the end of the video. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alright, I hope you got your guesses in. Yes, if you pick the person who I'm hovering right now as the person that requires the most mechanical skill in the game, you are correct. Oni is at the mercy of maps. A little bit less than Blight, because you don't necessarily slide off of things, but it does require a tech because you are on limited time. Yes, the deal breaker for these three, for me, and who requires the most skill, the most mechanical skill in the game, is Oni. If you're on inside map, Wesker has a chance. His bound is going to make him go through windows. Mind you, that might not be what you want to do in the moment sometimes. You might get rocked. But his power is applicable to pretty much every map. And that's almost the same with Blight. Once you get good with Blight, you're probably going to dominate on most maps, especially if you have busted add-ons. If you know how to hug tech, yada yada, the maps won't serve too much for you. Now, that being said, I do admit, Blight is probably my worst character in the game, but I don't think that's because purely of mechanics. Oni used to be my worst, actually. I just put more time into Oni because Oni feels a little bit more fair. Because he doesn't have such extreme add-ons as Blight. And people just DC when they see Blight, if we're being honest. So, at the end of it all, I have to give it to Blight. If you can hospital flick on a timer and your power and get multiple downs and know when to slug, when to not, when to just go for it, there's a lot that it requires to be a very good Oni. So, yes, my biggest winner for who requires the most mechanical skill in the game is Oni. I can already hear the disagreements in the comment section. I can already hear the actuallys, but let's talk about their criteria one last time. Somebody that requires mechanical skill, somebody that obviously will get bonus points for winning on their tougher maps, and who has tech that you need to learn to be effectively skilled with the bad guy. Yeah, that's Oni. Now, I know we all have our mains that we feel very passionately about. If you truly think that I got it completely wrong and off the mark, let me know and give me your reasoning. Don't just say, oh, I actually think that it's demo because you take skill to hold M2 and fake people out. Like, give me something, right? Give me an actual argument if you think that I'm wrong with Oni, and don't just say a cop out answer because they're your favorite. I will say, Billy, you were very close. Billy players were very close, but there's no text besides something that might not be a tech with is curving, and you have your power all the time compared to Oni, who is on a timer, and Blight much the same, Wesker much the same. You are on a timer, mechanically skilled, at the mercy of maps, and you need tech to actually pull through sometimes. So yeah, that's that. Again, if you're going to be angry with me, do it a little bit civilly. Give me an argument. And if you like the video, like it. Got a comment for me, comment. And until next time, peace out, my monstrosities.